I know what it's like to wake up in the morning and look in the mirror, seeing someone who looks a little different from who you really are on the inside. That feeling of putting on an outfit that isn't exactly yours, but that you wear because you've learned that it appeals to the people around you. It's as if every day you play a role in a play you didn't choose, smiling when you need to smile, agreeing when you should disagree, and hiding parts of yourself that someone, at some point, said weren't appropriate. I remember well those moments when you answer "I'm fine" when someone asks how you are, even though inside there's a storm of thoughts and feelings. It's funny how we become experts at showing only what others expect to see. Like a chameleon that changes color not of its own volition, but out of a deep need to blend in, to not be noticed too much, to not be a nuisance, to simply belong without making a fuss. Have you ever noticed how many times during the day we change little things about ourselves? At a work meeting, you're more serious and technical. With friends over coffee, a more relaxed version emerges. With your family, perhaps you're more restrained, or more patient, or more whatever you've learned to be to keep the peace. Each environment calls for a different version of you, and over time it becomes difficult to know which one is the real you, if any. That feeling of emptiness that sometimes appears at the end of the day, when you're finally alone, has a reason for existing. It's the exhaustion of carrying around all these versions of yourself, of keeping so many plates spinning at the same time. It's exhausting trying to be someone who pleases everyone, isn't it? And what's worse, even though you try so hard, there's still that constant fear that someone will discover that you're not exactly who you appear to be. People rarely talk about it, but almost everyone carries a set of masks in their bag or pocket. The mask of the competent professional, the always available friend, the perfect son or daughter, the ideal partner. Each one has been carefully molded from the expectations we meet along the way. Some of these masks have become so much a part of our face that we no longer know where the mask ends and we begin. There is a particular weariness in being who we are not. Have you ever felt it? It's like carrying a backpack that's too heavy all the time. At the end of the day, your shoulders ache, your back complains, and all you want to do is let go of the weight and just breathe. But how do we do that when we don't even remember what it's like to exist without that weight, without those expectations, without that constant effort to be what's expected of us? Fear is a constant companion on this journey, isn't it? Fear of disappointment, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. Perhaps you learned very early on that certain parts of you weren't welcome. Maybe it was that over-enthusiasm of yours that someone labeled annoying, or your sensitivity, which was labeled a weakness, or your unique way of seeing the world, which was labeled strange. And so, little by little, you kept these parts in tightly closed boxes inside you. Society has a particular way of pushing us into well-defined boxes. From childhood, we learn what is normal, what is acceptable, what is appropriate. Boys don't cry. Girls are delicate. Adults are serious. Elderly people are conservative. And without realizing it, we squeeze ourselves to fit into these definitions, even when they hurt, even when they cut away essential parts of who we are. There is something deeply human about this desire to be accepted and loved. There's nothing wrong with wanting to belong, with seeking connection with others. The problem begins when we realize that we are being accepted and loved for something we are not, for an edited and adapted version of ourselves. It's like receiving a compliment for a dish you didn't cook. It may sound good at the moment, but it doesn't really nourish. The criticisms and rejections we experience leave invisible marks, don't they? That time you expressed yourself freely and someone laughed. That idea you shared enthusiastically and were met with awkward silence. That moment when you showed vulnerability and felt overexposed. Each of these experiences taught us something, and often what we learned was to hide, to diminish ourselves, to conform to what seemed safe and acceptable. There is a curious paradox in being admired for something that doesn't reflect who you truly are. On the one hand, receiving approval is comforting, even if it's from an altered version of yourself. On the other hand, something inside you knows that this admiration isn't completely yours, that it belongs to a character you've created. And this silent knowledge creates a distance between you and others, even when they seem close. Do you know what I've noticed, walking along so many of life's paths? The most resistant trees are not those that try to bend to every wind, but those that develop deep roots by being exactly what they are. And so are we, even if we rarely allow ourselves to realize this simple truth. Every time we deny our essential nature, we create tiny fractures in our inner strength, like invisible cracks in an apparently perfect vase. Think of the river flowing down the mountain. It doesn't question its path, it doesn't try to be a lake or an ocean. The river simply flows by being a river, following its deepest nature. And it is precisely because it is completely river that it manages to carve out valleys, nourish entire forests, and find its way to the sea. What would happen if you too allowed your nature to flow without so many filters and dams? The child you once were didn't need a manual to know who she was. She simply existed in her entirety, without dividing parts of herself between acceptable and unacceptable. Remember that feeling of freedom? How you took up space without apologizing? How your laughter came from deep in your belly? How you gave yourself completely to the present moment, without calculating consequences or anticipating judgments. Sometimes we look at children playing and feel a twinge of envy. It's not just the energy they have, but the authenticity they carry. A 4-year-old doesn't wake up wondering if they're thin enough, smart enough, or on the right track in life. They simply are, in all their complexity and simplicity. At some point in our lives, we exchange this freedom for acceptance, and perhaps this is the biggest negotiation we've ever made without fully understanding the terms. Look at the seasons and how each one has its own essence, without trying to be another. Autumn doesn't try to hold on to its leaves because summer was more colorful. Winter doesn't apologize for the cold. Spring doesn't hold back in its blossoming. And summer embraces its heat without moderation. Each season is complete in itself, necessary in the greater cycle, perfect in its own nature. And you, when was the last time you allowed yourself to be a whole season, rather than just the days of pleasant weather? There is an ancient wisdom in trees that face storms. Those that try to resist completely, that refuse to sway with the wind, are often the first to break. But those that know how to dance with the storm, that allow a certain flexibility while keeping their roots firm, survive and even grow stronger. Isn't that a wiser way to live? Staying true to your essence while dancing with life's challenges? The people we admire most are not necessarily the most perfect, but the most authentic. The ones who seem comfortable in their own skin, who aren't constantly apologizing for existing. Remember that person you met once who seemed to radiate a special energy? It probably wasn't because she had solved all her problems, but because she had made peace with who she really was. Authenticity has a glow that no mask, no matter how well made, can imitate. It's like that home-cooked meal your grandmother or someone special used to prepare. It wasn't sophisticated, it didn't follow the rules of haute cuisine, maybe it wasn't even pretty enough for photos. But there was something genuine about it, something real that fed more than the stomach. People notice when something is real, even if they can't explain exactly how. There is a resonance in truth that faucet can never reproduce. Have you ever noticed how we breathe differently when we're pretending? It's more superficial, more contained. It's as if a part of us is on constant alert, monitoring whether we're pleasing, whether we're being accepted, whether we're living up to expectations. Now compare it to those rare moments when you feel completely at home, perhaps with a very close friend or alone doing something you love. Your breathing deepens, your body relaxes, something inside you rests. That's the difference between half existing and being fully present. Think about how many times you've stopped saying something important because it didn't seem appropriate. How many times have you held back a cry that needed to be cried? How many times have you disguised a joy that wanted to explode? How many times have you bitten your tongue instead of standing up for what you believe in? Isn't it strange that we spend so much time controlling the very thing that makes us human? Our emotions, our opinions, our deepest desires, what would we be without them? Have you ever noticed how tiring it is to maintain an image? It's like constantly editing a film in real time, cutting out the scenes that aren't quite right, adjusting the script as the audience changes. Meanwhile, real life, the kind that only happens when you're really there, passes by, like a landscape scene from the window of a moving train. And in the end, what we remember is not the perfect image we tried to project, but the moments of true connection that only happen when we let our guard down. There's an old story about a man who spent his whole life collecting masks. He had one for every occasion, for parties, for work, for family, for love. He got so good at it that people began to admire his masks, to compliment him on how he always looked perfect for every situation. One day, someone asked him what he really looked like without any masks. The man rushed home, eager to look at himself in the mirror. But when he took off all his masks, he didn't recognize the face he saw. He had spent so long being what others wanted him to be that he had forgotten who he really was. It's funny how often the very qualities we try to hide are the ones the world needs most. Your sensitivity, which may have been ridiculed, is the same sensitivity that allows you to perceive nuances that others ignore. Your different way of thinking, which may have caused discomfort, is what brings innovative solutions. Your intensity, which some found too much, is what brings passion where before there was indifference. What would happen if, instead of dimming these lights, you allowed them to shine in their entirety? Recognizing that we are living an adapted version of ourselves is the first step towards a profound transformation. It's like switching on a light in a dark room. Suddenly we can see what was there all along. We realize the adjustments we've made over the years, the parts we've hidden, the walls we've built. Not to judge ourselves for it, but to finally understand what happened and why we've strayed so far from who we really are. There is a simple but incredibly powerful question we can ask ourselves. If no one were to judge, if there were no negative consequences, who would I be now? Let this question echo for a moment. Don't rush the answer. Notice what comes naturally when you remove all external barriers, all expectations, all worries about others' acceptance. Often, the answer doesn't come in words, but in a feeling of expansion, as if something inside you could finally breathe deeply. Our true essence doesn't disappear when we hide it, it just goes somewhere deeper inside us. Like a seed waiting under the snow, waiting for the right moment to germinate again. All those qualities that were natural in you, your curiosity, your creativity, your unique way of seeing the world, are still there, ready to be rediscovered. The journey back to yourself is not so much about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you always were. The fear of judgment is perhaps the biggest prison we build for ourselves. We live as if we were constantly in the spotlight, being judged on every word and gesture. But the truth is that most people are too busy with their own internal dramas to notice our little flaws. As the philosopher Mark Twain said, we would be less concerned about what others think of us if we realized how seldom they do. This realization brings unexpected freedom, the freedom to be imperfect, to experiment, to make mistakes and to learn without the crushing weight of imaginary judgment. Sometimes we think that our authenticity will drive people away, when in fact the opposite is true. Authenticity creates genuine bridges, while masks only create illusions of connection. When you allow yourself to be seen for real, with your vulnerabilities and imperfections, something magical happens. You give others permission to be real too. It's as if your courage creates a field of safety around you, where everyone can breathe more freely. Look at the most meaningful relationships in your life. Aren't they the ones where you can relax, where you don't have to constantly perform, where you are loved not in spite of your quirks, but precisely because of them? These relationships are treasures because in them we find a true reflection of ourselves. They remind us what it's like to be real, what it's like to be accepted in our entirety. And perhaps the greatest gift we can give others is precisely this quality of authentic presence. There is a natural process of unlearning what no longer serves us. Just as the tree drops the leaves that have completed their cycle, we can gently let go of the behaviors and beliefs we have adopted just to protect ourselves or to be accepted. It's not a process of violent rupture, but of compassionate recognition. This served me at some point, it helped me survive, and now I can say thank you and let it go. Each layer we remove brings us closer to our essential nature, as if we were cleaning a foggy window so that natural light could enter again. There is a space between the stimulus and the response. In that space lies our power to choose how to react. And it is in this small gap that our freedom is born. When someone says something that would normally trigger your need to please or hide, try pausing for a moment. Breathe. Ask yourself, how would I respond if I were being true to myself right now? Sometimes just this moment of awareness is enough to interrupt automatic patterns that distance us from who we really are. Small daily choices shape who we become, much more than grand declarations of intent. The way you respond to an email, how you react when someone disagrees with you, how you decide to spend a free afternoon. It's in these seemingly insignificant moments that your true nature is revealed and strengthened. Don't underestimate the transformative power of small decisions in line with who you really are. Like drops of water that, over time, are able to sculpt even the hardest rock. The journey back to yourself is not a straight line. There will be days when you feel completely connected to your essence, and others when the old masks seem like the safest option. Don't punish yourself for this. Authenticity is not a final destination, but a daily practice, a commitment renewed every moment. Be kind to yourself on the difficult days, celebrate the small victories, and remember that every time you choose truth over approval, you strengthen your authenticity muscle. There is something deeply liberating about realizing that you don't have to please everyone. In fact, it's mathematically impossible. Different people have different values, perspectives, and expectations, often contradictory to each other. Trying to satisfy everyone is like trying to be in two places at once. It just doesn't work. When you accept this, a sense of relief comes over you. You can finally let go of this impossible burden and focus only on being true to yourself and kind to others, without the obligation to fulfill incompatible expectations. There is an ancient wisdom that crosses cultures and times, and which resonates with truth to this day: know thyself. Not as an intellectual exercise or a to-do list item to be ticked off, but as a continuous journey of discovery and acceptance. I observe that the people who find peace are not necessarily those who have had the easiest lives, but those who have made peace with their own nature, who have learned to navigate life from their authentic center, rather than being swept along by the currents of other people's expectations. Rediscovering who you are begins with silence. In a world that values constant noise, stopping and listening to your inner voice is almost an act of rebellion. It doesn't have to be complex or time-consuming, just a few moments in which you allow yourself to be completely present, without distractions. It could be during a walk, watching the sunrise, or simply sitting quietly at home. In these spaces of stillness, the voice of your essence, which may have been reduced to a whisper, begins to make itself heard again. The body often knows the truth before the mind does. When you're being authentic, there's a sense of expansion, of relief, as if something finally fits. When you're forcing something that doesn't resonate with who you really are, the body responds with tension, discomfort, a subtle tightening in the chest or stomach. Learning to recognize and trust these bodily signals is like having an internal compass, something that always points to your true north, even when the mind is confused by external opinions. I remember a woman who spent years trying to fit into a prestigious career that her parents had chosen for her. Every day she woke up with a feeling of heaviness, as if she were carrying a rucksack full of stones. She ignored this sign for years, thinking it was just tiredness or normal stress. When she finally had the courage to switch to a job she was really passionate about, that feeling disappeared completely. Her body had been trying to talk to her all along. She just had to learn to listen. A simple practice that can bring great insights is to revisit your childhood. What did you love to do before someone told you what was important or valuable? What activities made you lose track of time? What brought out that twinkle in your eye that is so natural in children? These memories often hold precious clues about your essential nature. The child you were wasn't concerned with status or approval. They simply followed what brought genuine joy and meaning. Start to notice when you're saying yes when you really mean no. This dissonance between words and feelings is a clear sign that you're prioritizing pleasing over being authentic. It's not necessary to make a complete revolution all at once. You can start with small situations where the risk of displeasing is lower. Perhaps saying "I'd rather not go this time" to a social event that doesn't excite you, or expressing a genuine preference when someone asks where you want to have lunch. These are small but significant steps on the road back to authenticity. One of the biggest barriers to being ourselves is perfectionism. The idea that we need to be perfect in order to be worthy of love and belonging. But perfection is an illusion that keeps us stuck, always trying to reach an impossible standard. True freedom comes when we allow ourselves to be good enough, when we embrace our humanity with all its imperfections and edges. Ironically, it is precisely in this assumed imperfection that we find our most authentic beauty, that which cannot be manufactured or imitated. Try observing your thoughts without completely identifying with them. Many of the critical voices we hear internally aren't really our own. They're echoes of parents, teachers, colleagues, the media, culture. You're not good enough, that's selfish, what will they think of you? When these thoughts arise, try to take a step back and ask, is this really my voice? Does this belief serve me? Does it resonate with who I really am? This simple pause creates a space to consciously choose which voices you want to listen to and feed. There is a powerful exercise that consists of writing your own life story, but from the most loving point of view possible. How would someone who knows you deeply and loves you unconditionally tell your journey so far? What qualities would they highlight that you may have overlooked? What challenges would be recognized with compassion, rather than criticism? This alternative narrative often reveals a broader truth about who you are, beyond the limitations of your own judgment or what you've absorbed from others. Consciously surround yourself with people who value you for who you really are, not for what you can do for them or how you make them feel. These relationships are like clear mirrors that reflect your true essence back to you. On the other hand, recognize relationships that require you to be less than you are, diminish your brilliance or repress important parts of yourself. It's not necessary to cut ties drastically, but it may be time to readjust boundaries and expectations in these relationships. Every time you allow yourself to be authentic, to express a sincere opinion, show a real emotion, follow a genuine desire, you are creating new neural pathways in the brain. What seems difficult or daunting the first few times gradually becomes more natural and fluid. It's like blazing a trail in a dense forest. At first, each step is an effort, but with time and constant use, the path becomes clearer and easier to walk. Authenticity is a skill that develops with practice. There is an important difference between being authentic and being impulsive or careless with other people's feelings. True authenticity includes taking responsibility for our words and actions. It's possible to be genuine and still be kind. Consider the context, choose the right moment. In fact, the more aligned we are with our essence, the less need we feel to express ourselves in aggressive or reactive ways, because we are not operating from fear or the need to defend ourselves. Try this exercise. Imagine your life in 5, 10 years' time if you continued exactly as you are, suppressing important parts of who you are. How would you feel? What kind of relationships would you have? What regrets might you have? Now, imagine the alternative scenario, you gradually allowing yourself to be true, more authentic, more in line with your essence. What would that life be like? Which vision energizes you more? Which gives your existence more meaning? Sometimes we need to clearly see the consequences of our choices in order to find the motivation to change. Remember that coming to terms with who you really are is not a one-off event, but a daily practice. There will be relapses, moments of doubt, situations in which the old habit of molding yourself to please appears again. This is completely normal and part of the journey. The important thing is not perfection, but the commitment to always return to the path of authenticity, with kindness and patience with yourself. As an old proverb says, to fall is not to fail. Failure is staying where you fell. There is a special quality about people who have assumed who they really are. It's as if they occupy space in a different way, more rooted, more present, more alive. It's not that their lives are perfect or without challenges, but there's an integrity that exudes in everything they do. When you meet someone like that, you feel it. There's a resonance, a vibration of truth that's almost palpable. And the good news is that this quality is available to all of us, not as a distant destination, but as a possibility that unfolds with every choice aligned with our essence. The fear of losing important people by showing who we really are is understandable. But there's a paradoxical truth here. The relationships that don't survive your authenticity probably weren't relationships with the real you, but with the version you projected. And as painful as the initial adjustment may be, there is a deep relief in being loved for who you are, and not for what you pretend to be. As the poet Rumi said, live in the solitude that is painful in youth but delicious in maturity. When we start to peel away the layers that aren't really ours, we often discover treasures that were hidden. Talents that have been minimized, passions that have been ignored, unique perspectives that have been silenced. It's like cleaning a musical instrument that hasn't been played for years. Suddenly sounds that were muffled can be heard again in all their clarity and beauty. The world needs that particular song of yours, the one that only you can play in your own unique way. The most profound changes rarely happen all at once. It's more like dawn. Gradually the light increases, almost imperceptibly at first, until you look around and realize it's already daylight. Your journey back to yourself will probably be like that. Small moments of courage and authenticity that, added up over time, completely transform the landscape of your life. Trust in this process. Every step, however small it may seem, is taking you closer to home. There is a special force that arises when we align our actions with our inner truth. It's as if all the energy that used to be spent maintaining masks can now flow freely to create, connect, and contribute. Tasks that seemed exhausting when done only to fulfill external expectations take on new meaning and lightness when they emerge naturally from who we are. Even challenges are transformed. They are no longer obstacles to be avoided, but opportunities for authentic expression. The world is full of people living lives that aren't really theirs. Careers chosen for status or security rather than vocation. Relationships maintained out of convenience or fear of loneliness. Opinions adopted to fit in with certain groups. It's like a big theater play where everyone is so busy acting that they've forgotten that they can just be. Your decision to live authentically isn't just a gift to yourself. It's a light that silently gives permission for others to seek their truth too. Human history is littered with examples of people who found their authentic voice and, in doing so, changed not only their own lives, but profoundly influenced the world around them. From artists to scientists, from activists to thinkers, those who have contributed the most are precisely those who had the courage to challenge the status quo and offer their unique perspective, even when it meant facing resistance or misunderstanding. Their authenticity is not a luxury or an indulgence. It may be exactly what someone needs to see in order to find courage in their own journey. There is a liberating simplicity in living in alignment with who you really are. Decisions become clearer because you have a consistent internal reference point. Relationships deepen because there are fewer layers of protection between you and others. Even failures and challenges become more bearable because they don't threaten a fragile identity built for external approval. As the philosopher Socrates said, "To know thyself is the beginning of all wisdom, and also the path to a life of greater clarity and inner peace." If we could see beyond time and space, we would realize that each human being comes into this world with a unique set of gifts, perspectives, and possibilities. As if each person were a specific note in a cosmic symphony, irreplaceable and necessary for the completeness of the music. When we suppress our essential nature, it's as if that specific note becomes muffled or distorted. The world literally loses something that only you could offer in your own unique way. Remember that the journey of authenticity is not about becoming someone completely new, but about removing the obstacles to being who you already are in your essence. It's like the sculptor who doesn't create the statue, but simply removes the excess marble to reveal the form that was already there. You don't have to strive to be authentic. In fact, it's precisely the constant endeavor to be something you're not that causes so much wear and tear. Authenticity is, at its core, a relaxation back into your true nature. Life is too short to be lived for the approval of others. When we reach the end of our journey and look back, we rarely regret the times we were truthful, even if it brought momentary discomfort. We regret more the times we kept quiet when we should have spoken up, the times we diminished ourselves when we should have taken our space, the times we ignored the call of our inner truth in the name of security or acceptance. There is an invisible thread that connects all those moments when you had the courage to be authentic. Each small act of truth strengthens the next, creating a resilient fabric of integrity that eventually becomes the very foundation of your life. And it's on this solid foundation that you can build genuine relationships, meaningful work, valuable contributions. Because in the end, what everyone really craves, beyond success, wealth, or fame, is the freedom to be who we really are, without excuses, without masks, without fear. I see a light in you that perhaps you yourself don't yet fully realize. A unique essence that the world is waiting to know in its entirety. The path back to yourself began the moment you recognized the possibility of living more authentically. Trust in this process. Trust in the inner wisdom that guides you, even when the path seems uncertain. Like the stars that guided the ancient navigators, your inner truth is always there, shining constantly, ready to guide you back home, to the place where you can finally say, "This is me," and that's more than enough.